And thanks, Cherise. You know what I see? There's some of my favorite pack of Enneagram 5s in this audience. Now, 5s don't like to be picked on, so I'm not going to mention their names, but some I haven't seen for a long time. And I'm very excited that they came today. And I'm very excited that you're all here. And hopefully we can entertain you. And as well as that, hopefully you can learn from each other and maybe from me too. So welcome. Now, Lucille had to get on an aeroplane. She is all over at the moment, so she has recorded her section. So I will do my section, and then we will hand over to her section. Feel free to pop questions. Oh, there goes Penny. Thanks for getting up early, Penny. Feel free to pop questions or comments in the comment section. And Cherise, can you watch and not let me get above myself? So as some of you may know, I'm quite ADHD. And a topic like this is just beautiful for an ADHD brain, because we can pop here and pop there and pop there and look for a meta narrative. And we can even bring ADHD in. So I'm hoping that I will keep walking forward and not all over the show during the session. And I hope you find it enjoyable. So I thought we could start with this and then have a conversation about it. So some of you may know how much we love the work of Steve Biko. So Steve Biko was a liberation theorist and existential philosopher in South Africa during apartheid. And one of the most beautiful things he said was that in time, we can bestow on South Africa the greatest possible gift, which is a more human face. So I'm thinking that as a way to start our conversation today about trends, we can think about what are we actually doing in coaching? What are our goals? For us at Aephoria, we intend to make work, relationships, and life more human and more humane. Make work satisfying and sustainable for humans and the universe. So I would be keen to hear from you what you think you're doing in coaching. So I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. And Cherise, I'm just thinking, since we have 43, we'll go for 21 of them. And I'll put you with one other person and have a 7-minute conversation. What are you intending to do in coaching? What is the big theme that is organizing your work? Is Pam saying she can't? Oh, okay, she's saying, all right, good. Thanks, Pam. Here you go. I'm going to open all rooms. It's completely arbitrary who you land up with. I'm sure everyone will be very interesting. See you in 7 minutes. 11. So, anybody want to share what they're doing in coaching, what they hope to achieve? What's the big narrative? Yes, Sav, hi.
I'll open it up. I had the pleasure of being with Chantel Wiley, I think it
Yes.
is. And we share a ring, me a 4 and Chantel a 5, and we came to the same conclusion is that although we both like qualitative understanding, trends, stats, analysis, information, research, we love sorry, that's quantitative, right? See, it's my neurodivergent thinking. We love the qualitative, the sensory engaging, beautiful people connection that colors the data. That was my word I threw in. Chantal, I hope you're okay with that. That colors the data. You can see I'm a 4 then. And that's what we loved, is we could meet in that point on our wings and really see how the humanness of everything comes into that. Thank you.
So you coaching because you love the beauty of humans.
Yes, but we both love data and information. And so we meet in that point where we bring the human connection into that as well. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Sav. Anybody else want to share why they're coaching? Yeah, Corin.
Yeah, I think my big picture is that to make the world a better place, like one person at a time, to touch one person's life at a time, to make the world a better place. And it's a whole ripple effect, isn't it? Just touching one person and also making sure at the same time that while I'm supporting my clients, that I myself am supporting myself. So just being very mindful of that I need to be calm and centered. I'm an NES 7, so I'm a little bit all over the place and I get very excitable. So I need to be like present, very focused when I'm coaching. But my overall goal is if I can just help one person at a time or be in support of one person at a time, it can make the world a better place.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here want to make the world a better place?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that's pretty common across the board. You know, that's kind of why we're in this work. And I think when we look at the trends and what's happening in the world, we're going to find that we really have our job cut out for us. Miriam and Jonathan, let's hear from you.
For me, coaching is gives me purpose at this stage of my life, and joy. And I'm doing a lot of work with migrants in the U.S., which gives me a tremendous amount of joy to help them decipher through what's going on right now for them. There isn't anything more giving of life than to complete a session with someone who has a lot of fear that's calmed down somewhat and becoming clear in their goals and intentions. And I just love it. It's yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And more power to your hand, Miriam. Jonathan and then Fran.
So specifically in the US, for my coaching and also coaching supervision, I have an increasing focus on helping people to look at differences, particularly around race and how that plays out in the workplace, and ways in which it is often ignored in coaching and also in the workplace. So I think, I don't know how US specific that is in 2025, but I think there's a great need here for that. So I'm focusing on that.
Yeah, we back you on that. We need it here. I think it's needed here, there, and everywhere. Thank you for bringing that in, Jonathan. Fran.
Thank you. I wanted to share something that just came up for me spontaneously. And well, two things, I'll get to that. The one was I was paired up with Duncan and with Susan, and then Duncan just said something that hit the nail on the head for me, which was helping people be more skillful in relationships. And it resonated because I think part of your definition was we're helping make work and relationships more satisfying. And to me, life, the quality of life is the quality of our relationships. But then just what came up for me as a head person was that coaching is about reminding both of us that everything is happening in the room. So for me, I'm growing in experience as a coach myself, and I find it very difficult I find it the ultimate challenge to stay present with somebody. And, there's that whole thing that the attention should be on them and giving them the space and the right guiding questions to come to their own solutions. But it's a practice of being present with another person and giving someone, I suppose, a relationship resource.
Beautiful. I love that. Supporting our relationships. This is the time for that. Thank you. Ritu, in the snow in Toronto.
Well, thank you. Lovely to hear you again, Julia, and lovely to be here with all of you. And I think Fran triggered me to share this because I so strongly believe in the power of the relationships. I coach more in the corporate sector and leadership and all of that. But at the end of the day, we are all humans. And I think that's the biggest piece. And we sometimes forget that when we are sort of responsible for a particular role. And I think the work that at least that talks to me, is how aware are we of ourselves? How inwardly sound are we? And how much are we focused on others? Because those are, to me, are the keys that hold us accountable for how we show up and accountable for how we bring others in, which is again goes back to what Fran said around the relationships. I think the competency capability piece is well taken care of by the people that I coach, but I think it's that unknown or that awareness. I think once that awareness sets in, it's beautiful to see the unfolding. Thank you.
Beautiful. So everybody agrees we want to make the world a better place. We're doing it through enhancing humanness, through relationships, through helping people unfold and deal with the world. I thought maybe we all had a reasonable idea of the state of the world. So I'm not going to spend much time looking at that, but I think you will agree we're in a time of extreme chaos and shift and change. And that's why I wanted us to kind of like ground ourselves in why we do this work, noticing the context, and then we're going to look at the trends and see what that might bring up for us in terms of where our work is going to go this year. So let me have a look. Okay. So I thought I'd start off with something very interesting. Now I'm going to do it so quickly, but copies of the slides will go out with the mailer. But just something super interesting is the numbers. Right, now look at that. We are in the second fastest growing industry in the world. Woohoo! Isn't that interesting? As a counterbalance to what we see in the world. Some more stats there from the ICF. And I'm not going to dwell on it. You'll get all the details in the slides. Just thought it would be good to look at some of the major regions where people are coming from, for this call. North America, there we go, huge, growing. Some more stuff from Louisa Zhu. You will see all of this. Growth market there. Growth market there. CAGR of 11.2, compound annual growth rate. Huge, huge, huge markets. Growth there again. And Africa. Well, look at this. South Africa is the third fastest growing market for coaching in the world, after China and India. How about that? Isn't that interesting? Wonder why. What was fascinating about this is we, certainly as South Africans, we look into the continent and we don't realize how much is going on there. And there is so much going on there. Giant coaching schools in Kenya, big projects in Sierra Leone, giant projects in Morocco. Egypt is full of coaches. It's absolutely fascinating how alive this market actually is becoming. Just thought I'd let you know that. And then another very interesting piece of information, the secondary market, the coaching certification market is becoming enormous in its own right. So I did a bit of a search for African coaching schools the other day, and certification in Africa, including ICF. It's enormous. It's absolutely enormous. So I want to have just a quick question to you. Why has the market got so big? Why is it growing so fast while the world appears to be going the other way? Penny, is that your hand?
Yeah, I was just writing in the chat. It's only recently occurred to me, relatively speaking, that we are being called to respond to what is happening, and people are responding to coaching, our good coaching, in kind, because they need it so much because of what they're experiencing, not only in their organizations, but also, and this came up in our conversation, the wider world, politics. US is, doing a lot of coaching these days. So I think it's a counterbalance to what is happening.
I love that, Penny. Isn't that exciting for us? And, what a beautiful gift we have to offer if we think of it in that way. Thank you for that. So people are valuing us more. They see our need. The world is, bizarrely enough, creating opportunities for us. So we'd better step in and step in responsibly. Any other comments on that?
I have just a question. I'm just curious, can I ask, I'm wondering about the data and whether it's talking about the supply or the demand side. Maybe
Yes.
that's a bit of a very simplistic way of asking it, but every now and then I hear people saying the market is saturated with coaches, whereas the picture could be the world needs coaches. And I totally agree with Penny and everything, and the outlook is that, yes, absolutely, there's a great need for supporting people. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, because like ICF measures market size by looking at input.
Okay.
And so they're using like number of coaches in action, number of sessions they held, that sort of thing, as far as I understand the data. Louisa Zhu and other people are looking at other data. So it is confusing in that way. My sense is that, and Fran, in South Africa, I think we have some weird statistic I heard long ago that actually Cape Town has got more coaches per capita than the whole world, because people come here because it's a great place to live and to coach from. And so maybe we're quite overstocked in the South African market. So, and then I saw out of the corner of my eye an excellent comment from Jonathan Sibley. So now I'm handing over to him. Jonathan, will you verbalize that beautiful comment?
Sure. There can be a great need for coaches, and also lots of people who call themselves coaches, a number of whom have minimal training and perhaps not a lot of work, and yet still call themselves coaches. It's
Yeah.
a very low barrier to entry still.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I recently met someone, actually, I was sitting next to someone on a plane who told me that he was a coach. And I said, oh, that's really cool. Tell me about the kind of coaching you do. Oh, well, whatever my clients want. I said, well, what was your study? He goes, oh, I've been in business for 15 years and I know everything there is to know about how to help people. And I said, wow, that's really great. But it was like, well, you could teach me how to coach in a session, can't you? So that was the things that I keep hearing from people. Oh, you're a coach. Can you teach me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
for that. We
yeah.
need to safeguard our profession. Chantal Wiley. Sorry, I saw you. Thank you, Miriam.
I had a thought, Julia and everyone. Hi. That's a little bit different. I've started to notice, I coach quite a lot of people that are academics, people with doctorates. And I'm saying that because, doctorates in hectic things like, biochemistry and astrophysics, and there's a lot of imposter syndrome going on. And people, people with these absolutely outstanding qualifications who've written doctorates on, pioneering things, are talking to me around fear of being found out for not being as good as I look. And this process of being able to talk to somebody and voice that for the very first time in their lives, because for the rest of the time they've lived this, they're living behind a facade where I have to be like this. And I'm the first one in my family with a doctorate. So this is what it looks like to be an academic. And I'm living up to this. And then to be able to sit with a coach and say, I'm afraid. And I'm not doing so well as I think I should be doing. So I think this, what I'm saying by giving this example is this confidential place to talk about the self, when the world, the family, social media, everything is telling me I've got to be like this. And actually behind, I'm having heart palpitations and I'm wondering whether I'm of any value in the world at all. That's what coaching, I think, is giving a lot of people. So I'm extrapolating and generalizing wildly. But I do think, especially with social media, where, if you're a whatever, you got to look like this. And people are short of spaces to be their vulnerable selves.
Yeah.
And I think coaching is a place they can come to.
Lovely.
I don't think they get the same stuff from therapy. I don't think so, because therapy doesn't extend into the sort of workplace owner. Yeah.
I love that. So in a world that requires increasing inauthenticity, we create places where people can be authentic, and that will always be needed. I love that. What about the equestrian world? Just to get a different perspective. Linda.
I was nodding a lot there. I completely relate and resonate with that comment with the previous speaker. So I coach people in the equestrian world, but in other sports as well, and at quite a high level sometimes, as well as quite novice. So across the board. And it doesn't really matter whether it is Mary Jane, who's going to her first little show and jumping over 2 foot high, or it's, Sarah Montgomery and she is jumping in the Grand Prix and doing her thing. They all have that sense of, I'm not actually good enough. I'm not actually coping. I'm not doing it well enough. Other people are going to notice that I have got here by mistake.
Oh, wow. It's such a profound thing. And I know this is a generalization, but just to back you up, I don't know if I've met anyone that thinks they're brilliant all round. This includes me. And I suspect that maybe this is becoming amplified in the current context. Another very useful offering that we can make to normalize feeling like an imposter. Or maybe, I don't know. I'm existential. So we would normalize feeling an imposter. Other approaches might say, no, you're not an imposter. We'd say, yes, you are, live with it. Everyone is. That's the existential view. Thank you for that. Lovely. All righty. Any other comments? It's lovely to hear from all the different practices. And places. Anyone else? Caroline, what's happening in your coaching world?
Hi, Julia.
Hi.
Well, I think what's coming up in my world is I coach quite a lot of Black females in some leadership positions, and imposter syndrome, yes, is huge, but I think a sense of belonging in the workplace and being tokenized and how they can step forward authentically without feeling like I'm the coffee that colored the milk in this context, and how best do we help young female professionals who are Black in particular step forward in their power and not be afraid of bringing that voice and the fear that I will be shunned, or the role that I have, I might just have to leave it. So there's something really huge around how do we create a sense of belonging? How do we create a sense of authenticity? How do we create a sense of acceptance in the world right now? And currently, with all major companies in the US and so on, really looking at possibly removing DEI and what that looks like in the world, what does, it creates a vacuum, and where do we have spaces for people to really talk to what it means to be a woman of color or a man of color or whatever context that you're different in, and be allowed to step in your power and be supported rightfully to move forward within the world and do exactly what you want to do.
Sure. We've got a lot of work, hey? We've had some excellent themes. DEI, being yourself and authentic. Imposter. Being human. Wow, that's a lot of work. These are the things we are being called to work on. Any last comments? I'm just scanning and seeing if there's somebody from a very different coaching world. Sabine, or maybe Anna. It'd be so nice to hear from a European perspective.
Well, glad to give some input. So yeah, based on my experience, and I coach actually not only in Europe, but what in complement of what I heard, what I'm noticing, especially in these still young leaders, especially female, how demanding it is to combine the private world with the professional world, and how that adds to the demand, and you know, it, yeah, I would say adds to. There's in my world also a lot of pressure to deliver, you know, to make business, and yeah, and things are difficult to, you know, to to accomplish. And so that there is that extra layer of demand. Yeah.
Beautiful. More and more pressure, more and more demand. Sophia, thank you, Anna. Hi, you're from Turkey with a South African accent.
No, I'm from Hungary, actually.
Oh, but also with a South African accent.
Also with a South African accent. Quite a bit of a global journey, but I just wanted to say I have an adult practice, and I also play in the leadership field with corporates sometimes, but I like variety. So I work with artists, I work with all kinds of people, NGOs. But I had a very interesting stint in a 7-year stint working for the African Leadership Academy, coaching young people from all over the continent.
Yes, yes.
And the teachers there as well. And one of the many things I could say about that, but one of the things that always struck me is, and this is also why I took on that work, is that the themes in that work were pretty much the same as they are with 50-year-old executives, right? I mean, a bit of a generalization, but more or less. So assertiveness, boundaries, emotional intelligence, social intelligence skills, cognitive skills, like systemic thinking, very similar. And young people at that age, from 15 to 19, were cognitively able enough to do that work. And in terms of habits, less set in their way. So it was an ideal time to do this work. And the self-awareness that we got to, and the shifts that we got to at that early age, was so phenomenal. And the way that set people up for the future careers and the future lives was such an important idea that I always thought, if I could, unfortunately I ran out of energy at the time to pursue this, but that's the place to start this work. You know? And I remember some of them writing back to me many years later to say, when they went to university in the US and got scholarships all over the world, their lecturers and teachers always remarked, wow, your emotional intelligence is through the roof. How did that happen? You know? So I think that's one of the main themes that I find myself working with at any age.
How beautiful. And how amazing that the themes are very similar, you know, across the board. That is beautiful. Thank you. Welcome to this group. We haven't seen you before, or rather I haven't. Sabine, hello. Thank you, Sophia.
Hi, Julia. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so you called on me for European representation.
Yes.
But I'm in an interesting position where my current client base is 90% South African. But it does give me an interesting perspective, I think, a little bit from the outside in, doing this work remotely. And one of the things that I do notice is the difference here between working with clients, maybe in the global north or west or whatever you want to call it, is you rarely hear people so much leaning or tapping into the sense of community to support them in wherever they want to go in life. So the classic trend of individualism, whereas in the South African client spaces, whether it's individual or in teams, corporate or private, you hear that much more often. Within that also like a massive, how do you say, like spectrum of diversity, of course, but you hear it much more often than I would more over here. So that's just something interesting, and also like an important learning for myself personally, and also maybe an awareness to bring back to people who feel like they're more in these, you know, individual silos, more than thinking about what does community mean? Do I have a community? Can I leverage it? Can I be more conscious about it? So that's just a noticing from my side.
Beautiful, beautiful. And there's a lot of really interesting work coming out about isolation at the moment and not being part of a community. And I think it comes up a little bit later, but one of the more interesting researchers was noticing how isolation breeds fundamentalism. So the more isolated communities can become, the more they get locked into incels and smaller community units. It's a very interesting phenomena. And I know the Surgeon General of the US said that isolation is as bad as like 14 cigarettes a day or something like that. Yeah. It's a very serious disorder, malaise. And something we can do something about. Thank you. Any last comments before we look at some of the other trends? No, all good. Great. So, I mean, this is just the last slide from that pack of slides, but I just also want to just re-notice again that the secondary market around coaches, certification, training, supervision, that is growing hugely, and it's useful for coaches who've been in the business for a while to think about that as a career opportunity, because as I'm going to show you later, one of the trends is that the older bobbers, the coaches, may not be able to bridge into the younger generations. So we'll talk about that later. Some of the trends. So I've just picked up a few things and you are probably going to know them all. We're going to talk quite a lot about tech and where it's useful, where it's not. But these are just some of the coaching trends. What is interesting for us is, so we used to sell these giant leadership development programs, 4 weeks a year, face-to-face time, 6 coaching sessions ahead, measure maturity at the beginning and the end. They got made smaller and smaller and smaller. We were wondering what the trend was globally. And then we heard about an enormous program in Europe, 82 leadership teams, sort of year-long program. So, you know, there were complaints that these leadership development programs were too long and too expensive. And we thought maybe they were on the wane, but actually, maybe not. Maybe they're being picked up, especially with multinationals who are trying to build some kind of coherent culture right across the world to stabilize the inner workings of the company. So I'm not going to go into these. We're going to look at them again, or the ones that I'm interested in rather. So this is an interesting thing. Our buyers, our coaches, they used to just be procurement people, but now they're experts in our field. This is interesting. This is very interesting. So some buyers are more involved. They want to know our methodologies, where we went, what our approach is, all that sort of stuff. And then we're also seeing dispersed buyers. So some companies where we used to have one person as our major contact, and we'd spend a lot of energy building this major contact. Now the procurement systems have become dispersed. So where there was 1 or 2 people signing off, there's now 12. And these 12 people are working off pieces of paper and not experiences. So there's a kind of a neutralization around procurement systems for other organizations. This one I loved because I'm hitting 60 this year. And so I have to ask myself the question of how relevant I still am. Am I aging out of a potential pool of clients? So this refers to 2 things. The first thing is, when you've been consulting and coaching for a while, you kind of grow up with an organization and with people that is on a similar age that you sell to, and you build relationships and you co-facilitate and all that. Then they retire, and then you realize you're still around. Are you still relevant? Is this what you should be doing? Can you actually be useful to the Zeds, or are you just going to be full of judgment? Interesting questions. And sort of related to that is this trend around don't integrate social, don't socialize people into a company culture, integrate them in. And so what that kind of means is using coaching to help people to find a way to be themselves, not to find a way to learn the corporate dance. So we need a little bit of the dance so that they can get by, but something around helping people integrate. This anti-work movement in the Gen Zs, a lot of coaches land up working in the space where actually the Zs don't want to be in work, and now the corporate is trying to find a way to keep them. This is a very, very interesting dynamic. Reverse mentorship and coaching. This is when young people mentor older people. It's reverse to help older or maybe less fluid people connect with the zeitgeist of today. I think it could be an absolute joy. Can you imagine if you get a 22-year-old to come and coach you? Wow. Can you imagine the things they can get you to do? Then something. So I don't know if any of you sit on LinkedIn and you just watch the coaches posting and they're posting and they're working and it's like overwhelming and there's another one and there's another one. There are so many people saying things. How are you going to be heard? And I suppose this is sort of leaning towards this idea of specializing. What's your niche? And then authenticity matters more than ever. We don't want to be like AI. I know that's a generalization, or a computer. We want to claim the human elements here. So authenticity is critical. And as we heard earlier, we have to provide safe spaces for authenticity when the world doesn't really bring them. Although AI can do that too. Some general broad comments. Anybody want to say anything? How are you doing? I'm going super fast because it's actually much more interesting to listen to you. Let me have a look at the next one. Now this, of course, I love. So this is very interesting because the amount of coaches working in neurodiversity is growing and growing and growing. They're coming in from coaching, they're coming in from teaching, and they're coming in from medicine. They're coming in from all over. And in fact, I was talking to a therapist who specializes in this work, and he says actually neuronormal brains are the outliers. There are no neuronormal brains. So it kind of makes me think maybe we should all have a bit of this in our toolkit. If everyone is going to have a neurodiverse brain in the future, how are we actually going to work with people? Lots of neuroscience, mindfulness, and management frameworks. My personal experience is a lot of those things are not so good for the ADHD lot because they're trying to train us out of being who we are, which is horrible. And so I would like to see some more development in that area. Lots and lots of ADHD, which is AUDHD, people on the spectrum and with ADHD kind of work going on that deals with all of that. And then lastly, a beautiful new book by two fabulous people, Bontle Senna and Sarah Louise Ackroyd, came out, I think, this week. The Neurodivergent Lovers Club, How Neurodivergent Women Lust, Like, and Love. It's a fascinating book. And I heard Andrea Balboni, who's a sex coach, interview these two people about the sex lives of neurodivergent people. Fascinating. And of course, Bontle Senna is a South African. Just worth kind of listening to stuff coming out. I mean, how specialist is this? It's neurodivergent, it's ADHD, and It's like, lust, and love. Fascinating. Lots and lots of coaching niches coming through. Sex coaching, Andrea not here today, menopause, law practice coaching. Wow, so many lawyers decide to become coaches. It's amazing. And in a lot of sort of professions where there's the technical skill makes you the leader, and then you get to be the leader and you can't lead. So there's a lot of those specialist niches like finance, medical doctors. So the whole niche thing is becoming more and more pronounced, especially in the UK. So, Chantal Wiley, it's for you. So what I find is I've resisted some parts of neuroscience for a very long time. And I've had to say to myself, it's time you understand it, Julia. And Boyatzis' Science of Change, very, very helpful around setting up the brain for effective coaching. The bit that I really loved is, you know, typically we'd come into a coaching meeting and say, okay, what are your goals? And that immediately disturbs the brain, hijacks the amygdala, and makes it stressful for people because goals and outcomes are stressful. So he always talks about how do you start the conversation by settling the brain. I love that. And for me, that gives us a direct idea about where AI could be very useful. So although we know AI could settle our brains, Boyatzis says maybe it's the humans that do the brain settling and the AI can do the creating of goals and manifesting goals, part of the coaching journey. Just an idea. Thought it was quite interesting. Team coaching, I just wanted to bring this in because there is some suggestion that more and more team coaching is going on. I'm not sure how to measure it, but there's a lot of talk online and a lot of different methodologies. I've become intrigued by this guy, Dr. Paul Lawrence. And yay! And one of the reasons why is I see him moving around Africa. So he actually has a nice big global picture. And the future is team, according to him. Team is the future. So this kind of coaching is only going to increase. And you know, after structuring a number of team program initiatives in organizations, I know that huge debate, like, are we going to do like all the teams in the organization, or are we going to do all the leaders in the organization, or how are we going to spread the word? What is the most effective way? And I really liked his idea of focus on the people who are constantly moving around the organization. It's just so practical. And then he had something really interesting to say on trust, because I know we've all had projects where we've had to work on trust, and then we all tend to go for the effective trust, when actually we could work much more easily with cognitive trust. Any comments? How are you doing? Are you still alive? Cool. Right. Oh, Jonathan, yes.
Yeah, just one comment around team coaching. I think it is part of or under an umbrella of systemic work. And so even working individually, people are on teams, people lead teams, and therefore having some sort of awareness of how do teams function, how should they function, what sort of dysfunction is there. I think can be really helpful, as well as how do we not replicate working in silos when working with teams?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of engagements where there are multiple silos of team coaching and without looking across the work.
Yeah. I like that enormously, especially the idea that I'm reading into it, which is even if you're just a one-on-one coach, if you don't understand how teams work, you're going to be much less useful. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Great. Now, I had to share this with you. It was too exciting to keep to my own. So, tech existentialism, right, is a new field of research coming through. Of course, it's coming from the existentialists, but also the tech people. And it's an exploration of what does it mean? What's the lived experience of being in a technological environment? How fascinating is that? Is this something we ever think about? Like, what is the lived experience? How are we being moved around by technology? How is our, how do our feelings change? That's, exploring that. And what I loved was they comment about what about free will in a technological environment. So we often panic that machines are going to take over the world. So my interpretation of this is actually we should be worrying not about the machines, but about the stupid humans who are happy to hand over tasks to machines that they shouldn't be. So when we look at the lived experience of living in a technological environment, what does that mean for how people should be? How does free will operate? Do we just follow the technology? How do we control our own lives? How do we express free will in a technological environment? Isn't that fascinating? So it's about how can we stop operating as idle machines? And I popped in another book at the end, just if you're in the mood for it, which is on techno-feudalism. What killed capitalism? Maybe can offer some insight into Mr. Musk. Okay, and then this is something else that's terribly interesting to look at and to think about as a coach. This guy, Jan de Vos from Ghent University. So we're starting to see a bit of a backlash, little suggestions of it all over the world about how things have been over-psychologized, how we can use psychological explanations for anything. And sort of linked to that is Tana Deneen's book, which Manufacturing Victims, what the psychology industry is doing to people. How fascinating is that? It looks like the zeitgeist is turning a corner. So Jan de Vos is really interesting on criticizing the psychologization of everything. He also has really interesting things to say about neuroscience, neurologization, as he calls it. But the bit that I find really interesting is his thinking about the digitalization of intersubjectivity. So what has happened to the relationship between people and how has that been digitalized? And he talks about fake subjectivities and fake intersubjectivities. How fascinating is that? I don't know how this is going to come into our coaching, but I think we'd better learn about it. Any thoughts? No? Am I missing people? Charisse, can you see everyone well?
Julia,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking as we talk about this, there's something for me, a theme around simplifying things when things are deeply complex. You know, I think it's dangerous to be saying, oh, neuroscience says that the brain will always defend and these are make it. And I think when you really talk to Boyatzis or Mark Solms here at the UCT Neuroscience Institute, it's deeply complex, yeah? And the work that Solms has done, retranslating Freud, looking at the neuroscience of everything that Freud said, it's so complex. So I think, you know, I would agree with Jan de Vos about being glib and simplified, but I wouldn't just dismiss the work of some of these researchers. I mean, Boyatzis in his podcast around this book said he had a fight with the publishers because he had 100 pages of references. Every single sentence in this book, The Science of Change, has got a reference of a whole lot of research that backs up one sentence that he says. So I think we can't throw that all out, but the simplification, which it sounds like Jan de Vos is talking about, I think we have to be very careful of that.
Yeah, I love that. But isn't that that's a tough nut, actually, because the world wants us to simplify. And, you know, as all the other professions simplify stuff, we want it simplified too, because we get used to only reading and digesting certain lengths. I mean, I don't know how we're going to cope with that. So it's a global phenomena. I mean, like, I had an interesting thing the other day, like, how many of you read long form books? Great. Great. And you know what I also heard the other day, which was totally interesting, was an author had written a book and they wrote the first chapter for CEOs because that's all the CEOs will read. And then the second chapter was a little bit more in depth, and that was sort of more kind of for the coaches. And the third chapter got into the real meat of how things are done. How fascinating is that? I'm glad you all read books still, because it's terribly tempting, those podcasts. Thank you, Chantal. Anyone else?
So I'll jump in. I think, I agree with what Chantal was saying. For those on the call who are parents, so raising teenagers, like, oh, I feel so sad. I'm like, darling, as humans, we have a range of emotions. You can't only be one thing. So I think the world is also feeding our children with a whole lot of stuff. And then at work, when we coach, we're also perpetuating. And so I agree with your last slide by De Vos. We're simplifying things a bit much. We want the shortcut. Unfortunately, life is a process and it takes a long time to develop. So maybe I'm just an old soul, but it's like, goodness, let things cook. What's the rush? Where are we rushing to? Okay, you are blue ticked. And then how does that change the price of bread? Keep it moving. We try again tomorrow, So we have lots of work to do, I think, and just kind of helping people connect to our common humanity. We're still humans first, and not try and microwave everything that it's, super speedy and we simplify everything. It's not always so simple.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. And I suppose there's something there about our own learning to not just look for the quick fix or the audible summary, but to make an effort to keep digging deep and renewing ourselves. Thanks, Sharon. That's great. Anyone else there? All good? Andisiwe, was that a hand or no? Cool. Okay, right. So we're doing fine on time. let's just let me have a think. I think what we can do now. Oh yes, hi Sophia.
Hi, last quick comment. I was smiling a bit at the aging out of the coaching cohort.
Yes.
Just a comment on that. It's an interesting experience I've had when I was younger, and I'm a clinical psychologist first and then a coach. And both in my therapeutic work and in the coaching work, I've so often had this experience. I used to also look a lot younger than I was, which didn't help at all in the beginning. And clients would come in and go, but where's the nice old lady with the white hair who's wise, who's going to help me, you know? And this was such I've had this in various formats. So I think it's maybe maybe this has changed. I would love to hear from others, but I think there is this sense of wisdom comes with age, and I think people look for that of all ages. I've had this from young people, from middle-aged people, from older people. So yeah, just throwing that in there.
Yeah, I think it can work always. But what other experiences do people have coaching across the generational divide? Duncan like that. Any comments anyone wants to? Yeah, Karen, hello.
Hi, Julia, and hi, everyone. So there's a lot of work that's been done by Chip Conley. He has a school called the Modern Elder Academy, and he talks about the modern elder and how there is such a need for the recognition of wisdom in our society, which often gets swept under the carpet in a Western culture, whereas in a more traditional culture, the wisdom of the elder is revered. So I think, you know, there's a lot that we can actually do to think about how we look at aging in our Western culture. And I tend to agree with Sophia. I also moved into coaching because I thought that it is a discipline where age is perhaps appreciated. Before that, I was very much in an IT space, and certainly grey hair is not appreciated in the IT world. You're regarded as out of date. So yeah, just my 2 cents worth.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Lovely. Maybe we need to claim more of that. Miriam.
Last year I had a very funny experience. I was coaching a 24 or 25-year-old, and she said, "You know those old people?" And I said, "What old people?" She goes, No, you're not old," she said. But she said, a lot of people look at, you know, she said, before I chose you as a coach, I talked to people my age and they didn't know anything. And so when I say old people, I go, it's okay, you could say old people. But it was actually really funny because she said that she specifically picked me out of a team of people. And I'm finding that I have like 3 clients that are just 30 years old. And they're recommending their friends, they're referring their friends to me. So I think it's how we come to the conversation. I don't think it feels like how we come into the conversation and what we think of ourselves is really important. And it's, yeah. So how we show up with our white hair is really important.
Yeah. Hey, Andesiwe.
Hi, Julia, and hi, everyone. Just to add from a young point of view, about the age. So, so we do look at older and more experienced people as they know more. But then there's always an element of, you know more, but it's not what I want to hear at that moment. So it's always I can hear what Julia says to me. Yes, she's experienced it, but it's not doesn't relate to me in that sense. And look, what Miriam was saying about it's how you come to the conversation. It's also, we listen to people who is our age, because they come into the conversation with something that you relate to and something that you can learn, even though you're experiencing the same, in the same timeline, if I would say it like that. And for me, my experiences, I'm just starting off coaching, so it's just a new adventure for me. And I get a lot of people saying, you look younger than your age, but then you sound older. And then I'm like, oh, thank you. I don't know how to take that, but I appreciate it. So from a young point of view, we value age, and the gray hair speaks a lot to us, but sometimes it's more of a how you approach young people, because we get a lot of, you don't know what you're talking about, you're too young, you haven't experienced life. And that just shuts us off. We're like, okay, fine, thank you. And coaching is a really tough subject to have with young people, because they don't take it as like an experience, like you giving them something to equip them for the future. They take it as you telling us what to do. And that is something that we fight against a lot as young people. And just having somebody who's much older to not come to my level per se, but to put themselves in a space where they can hear what I'm saying without any judgment or fillers. So that's the 2 cents I'll have about the age part.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm thinking of nominating myself as a coaching client for you.
You're most welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Beautiful, Andisiwe. Thank you. Fran, were you having a hand up or no? Okay.
No,
Thank
I'm just
you.
also signing up for coaching with Andisiwe.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Chantal.
Julia,
No.
just a funny little thing, talking about connecting with younger people. I keep my ears really flapping about stuff around social culture, lingo, and you know my wonderful young colleague, Kamogelo. I listen to what he's talking about, and then I sort of can drop a reference to some music artist who I've never listened to, but who I know everyone's talking about, and then it's like, oh, she gets us. So it's a bit, you know, I'm not like deeply into that kind of music or anything, but it's something about picking people up where they're at. And sometimes the language or the social references really helps with that.
Beautiful. Maybe we need a supervision session on social references and languages for coaching Zeds. Only apply if you have gray hair. Alrighty, so we've had a lot of different themes. And I think now's the time to play Lucille's video, which is 12 minutes long. And then we can have a kind of an integrating conversation at the end, if that suits you. Now look, Charisse, there you are. Charisse, are you ready to rock and roll? Thank you for doing.
I will share.
Hi there, everyone. I'd love to talk to you in this supervision session about the trend of AI in coaching. Apologies for not being here in person. As we know, in these volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times, plans change faster than we can make it. So hopefully you still get the benefit of some of my thoughts here. I guess the starting point when we talk about AI in coaching is really just to ask yourself what your current mindset and orientation towards it is. In my experience, when we ask the question, are you afraid or anxious of what AI means for us as coaches? The answer that most of us give is yes, definitely, or at least to some extent. Now, I think as an Aephoria coach, especially if you're using our Aephoria maturity assessment, the interesting thing is that you are already using AI in your coaching as you use this tool, as of course, our assessment is marked in part by a large language model algorithm. So let's jump deeper into what the trends are as we see them early in 2025. I think there are 3 main areas in which AI is impacting on coaching: efficiency, agents, AI agents acting on our behalf as coaches, and then supervision and training as a 3rd area. Now, firstly, if we look at efficiency, this is not particularly different from most other industries. There are lots of opportunities for us to use tools to schedule, to do session summaries, to do analysis of qualitative team data when we're doing team coaching. And I think here most of us are exploring, hopefully already, some of the efficiencies that are provided by AI tools more generally. But let's jump more into the scary parts of this. And this is, will AI coaches replace us as human coaches, as a question? Now, what is an agent? An agent is, if you think of an AI bot that is acting on your behalf in some kind of way. Some coaches have already developed versions of their AI agents. So you might have TonyRobinson.ai as an example. I don't know if he has an AI, but TonyRobinson.ai acting and doing some coaching on your behalf. This allows you to take your methodologies and frameworks and to in some way build an AI agent that operates on your behalf. Now, if we look at what the main trends are here, what we find is that a 24/7 AI assistant that supports your coaching clients between sessions, at this point, they're already available. Many of them are chat-enabled rather than voice-enabled. But where they're at right now is that they complement human coaching. So very few of these agents are developed at the level where they will replace you totally. And if we look at some of the stats from our own South African developed Coach Vici, Prof. Nikita Blanche is one of the leading people in AI and coaching. What we see is that if you use Coach Vici alongside some of your other coaching, specifically that focuses on goal and performance-driven coaching, it shows that people are 37% more likely to reach their goals because of the use of this AI agent in the form of Coach Vici. The AI agents, 24/7 availability, obviously that's very, very attractive to coaching platforms or aggregators like BetterUp that are really trying to democratize coaching. So some of these platforms are already using some coaching bots to assist the between session work. And I think that's where things will mostly stay in 2025. The core thing to ask yourself is where you stand on this and whether you want to be using an agent like this at this point in time. Of course, the longer you take to get into this kind of trend, the further the field will move, which might make it less expensive in future than it might be to do something like this now. Technology is developing very fast, but early adoption sometimes makes it easier to stay with the times. Key thing is, if we're using agents, we shouldn't get too invested in what we've built because the technology is driving so fast. Something that is actually a lot more exciting for me to think about is the way in which we can democratize supervision and improve the quality of our coaching through the use of frameworks and AI apps like Avida. Now, if you haven't heard of Avida yet, basically what you can do is you can take a session that you've done and you can take it through the Avida engine to give you feedback on all kinds of good practice elements of coaching. Percentage of speaking time, how the different ICF competencies came into the session. And so if you're not in a position to necessarily get regular supervision, a platform like Avida can help you improve the quality of your coaching for a bit less of the price than you would pay for supervision. Now that's a very exciting field in coach training as well, and making coach training more efficient for the people doing the training. So that's definitely something to go and explore. So if we then look forward, what are some of the trends and where will it be going? I think the key thing at this point, and this is the ICF and the EMCC's positioning, is we're seeing AI as a collaborative partner. So it will continue to evolve in more of a collaborative agent that assists you to do your work, especially doing 24/7 work and between session work. What's then happening is the efficiency and availability of voice-activated coaching tools will actually, I think, become more and more of a thing over the next year or two. So this will facilitate more natural and interactive coaching sessions with an AI bot compared to if you typing away. Then the third edge beyond voice is using virtual reality in coaching. And there's so many exciting opportunities for this. So if you're doing a lot of virtual work, immersive meeting spaces where people have more than a little photograph on mural, but an actual avatar that's part of the meeting in some way, using this to do practice conversations for having difficult conversations, or simulating high pressure situations for leaders and execs. And then, of course, there's interesting VR biofeedback mechanisms, some of that already available, but I think that will continue to grow in neuro coaching to give you feedback on how your mindfulness is working, etc. Then we have broader trends around the ethics of using AI. And so this focus on human AI synergy and placing humanity at the center of how we use technology rather than just haphazardly falling into things is an important thing to think about. So can we think about what the principles are around which we want to implement our AI, what it should do, what it shouldn't do, what values remain in place? Those are important things to distinguish. Now, if we listen to what people from the EMCC and the ICF are saying and some other thought leaders, they're basically saying embrace it. Keep learning and stay true to the values of coaching, but embrace it. It's part of the field and it's not necessarily going to go away. And as businesses look more and more towards cost efficiency, this is one of the ways in which you can build some cost efficiency into it. When we listen to conversations with some of these thought leaders around what still distinguishes human-to-human coaching from human-to-bot coaching, there's a lot of different things that come to the fore. Human empathy and intuition in coaching. One of the ICF thought leaders on this calls this the randomness of the human-to-human interaction. So there are things that will spark in your memory as a coach or in your neural network that, looking at even the best knowledge sources, this relates to metaphors, it relates to wisdom. Those things are not necessarily available in the same way in a knowledge-driven AI coaching bot. We also see that most of the AI coaching bots are operating at kind of specializing and performing levels of capability from a maturity perspective. So post-conventional coaching is something that is more in the human space. And we know that a part of maturation happens relationally. One of the pieces of research which I find interesting is that the early research in fields like career coaching shows that AI coaching bots, of course, we have this potential to give our authority away, for authority bias to come in when we are working with coaching bots. So the bot should know better than me. What we're seeing is that unless you're interacting with a coaching bot a lot, and a lot is really more than once a day or once a week, if you get into these long 2 a.m. conversations with the coaching bot, people are not likely to fall into authority bias yet in relation to things. We're still seeing the bots as bots. And that's an interesting thing to think about. How do the different human biases play into our relationship with coaching bots that's different to what happens in a human space? What we have found is anecdotal evidence that people are sometimes more willing to talk about things that they're deeply ashamed about and embarrassed about when they are working with bots compared to with humans. So both the ICF and the EMCC have been developing coaching frameworks and standards. I think the ICF's is a little bit more thorough at this point in time. I've put some links in there if you want to go and look at the frameworks and standards. And it focuses really on ethical guidelines, transparency and trust. You need to know what kind of biases are built into the tools that you use. You need to make sure that there's always informed consent. You can't just fall into using AI without your clients being aware of that. And then, of course, the encouragement of learning and exploration in the field for all of us. Go and try, participate in conferences on the topic, explore the options that are available here. So I asked ChatGPT, I use some AI to say, what are the top 5 ways in which coaches can stay abreast? And there you see some thoughts and ideas. So take some courses, follow coaching thought leaders, experiment with AI tools, and it actually recommended some. Join AI and coaching communities, and the ICF and the EMCC have these at the moment. And then set up AI news alerts in places like Google. So you can set an alert for AI and coaching or AI executive coaching. Thank you so much for thinking and listening to some of these trends. I'm sure that Julia will be facilitating an interesting conversation with you around the topic. The second trend in coaching that I'd like to offer you is an opportunity to think about the inner development goals and their impact on what we're doing in the coaching field. So let's explore what the inner development goals are and where they come from as a starting point. So the inner development goals are an attempt to help us think about the inner development that's required to help us not only create a more sustainable future, but also to navigate where we are at contextually in the world today around environmental and species collapse, global warming, and this drive towards needing to lead towards a sustainable future as opposed to continuing on a crash course towards something more catastrophic for the human race and the Anthropocene era. So the inner development goals are a framework of personal and collective growth, and it's all about helping us to mature. If I have to boil it down to our language in the Aephoria group, help humans mature in line with what is required to create a sustainable future. So we'll look at the aspects of the IDGs in a moment, but it's all in support of self-awareness, resilience, and ethical decision-making. And it's inspired by research and initiatives from the Inner Development Goals Initiative. This is an actual organization from Scandinavia that exists at this point in time. And many OD and coaching practitioners and thought leaders, people whose articles you probably read, whose podcasts you follow, participated in their development. They have been around for, I think, about 4.5 years, more publicly at this point in time. But what we've seen in the last year is the momentum around the conversation around the IDGs really picking up speed in the last year. So if you're not yet familiar with it, I've included a YouTube link to a short 5-minute video that introduces you to the idea of the inner development goals. So if we look at the focus areas of the IDGs, they fall into 5 categories: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And what we will see here is then some sub-focus areas. So inside being, things like an inner compass, integrity and authenticity, self-awareness, presence. In the thinking areas, complexity awareness, long-term orientation and visioning. And you can go through this list and just take a look at them. Now, I think when we start just at face value, are these things that are part of what we offer in our coaching practices and some of the inherent values and skills that we drive in coaching? I think totally. So these are not new things, but what we do have is the newness of the framework, which brings coherence to how we think about these things. And it also brings it into conversation with context. It brings it into conversation with why these things matter. It's not just there for your own enlightenment, but it's really there for you and development. It's there in support of a sustainable future. So the coherence of the framework and the putting it into context, 2 great offerings here. Now, how do the IDGs inform coaching? I think the first thing is it's an opportunity for us to align personal and professional growth. So when we're doing lots of personal development work, we can integrate it into how we're thinking as leaders and what leadership of the future looks like in support of sustainability. It also helps you as the coach to facilitate conversations about the mindset of the coaching client in relation to a larger contextual long-term framework. The IDGs also really, there's an inherent strain around emotional intelligence and resilience during times of change. And coaches can use the IDGs to support the leaders to develop some of these key skills that's required to navigate the context that we have at this point in time. And then it also provides a framework of defining what transformative leadership development really looks like. Transformative leadership development and what we call in Aephoria programs that support leaders to mature, to make a step change and for systems to mature. I think sometimes these are very idiosyncratic or context-specific frameworks. And here we can locate a context-specific framework into the larger context of human development and where we are at in our trajectory as a human species. And that's quite exciting. I think it also builds more of a business case for transformative leadership development and the need for such programs. So ways in which you can use this in your coaching, you can use it to help facilitate reflection. So you can talk about the IDGs. It gives you an opportunity to talk also more broadly about sustainability and long-term futures. And it can inform self-reflection exercises, development and identification of areas of growth, drawing on internal resources. So it's a reflection tool. You can look at all 5 of those areas and use that as a starting point for conversation, especially in conversation with the Sustainable Development Goals. Secondly, you can use it to set goals and develop action plans. And this is actually very important because some of the critiques we look at later is like we should not use the IDGs for just too much exclusive navel gazing. It is about action. So we can help executives not only set development goals across all 5 IDG dimensions, but also around action taken on sustainability. And this can help us structure long-term coaching sessions, long-term coaching programs into maybe even those 5 themes that we get in the IDGs. And then, of course, it can help, we can use assessment tools to help us align with the IDGs. So 360-degree feedback, very useful. You can also look at other self-assessment tools that incorporate the IDG indicators. And then if we look at something like the Aephoria Maturity Assessment, this is actually an excellent holistic entry point into the IDGs. And it can be used as a pre-post measure. Where were we at from a holistic maturity perspective before we went on this coaching or group leadership development program aligned with the IDGs, and then using the assessment afterwards to see whether it's actually made a difference in some way. So I think it's important when we look at frameworks like the IDGs to also look at the critiques and concerns. Some of this, the overemphasis on individualism, we know that there's a polarity between the individual and the collective. And the IDGs really have, as much as collaboration is part of what we're looking at in the IDGs, is this overemphasizing the development of the individual leader and individual responsibility, and therefore disabling in some way collective action. Concrete metrics, we can build metrics for this, and I think our integrated metric that we have is something like a maturity assessment. But if organizations are starting to evaluate things, we need to choose these assessment frameworks very carefully. And I think that's where some of the adult development type of methodologies are maybe in some ways less gamifiable compared to if we use some other self-report mechanisms. For me, however, that's not the most important critique. I think other critiques that we should emphasize more, the one is the potential for elitism. So a gap in access where only privileged executives engage with the IDGs. If we look at the way in which the IDG conferences, etc., roll out, these are very expensive events to attend. There are opportunities being made available for more accessibility and some regional hubs being developed for this year's conference. But it can easily create more of an elitist way of looking at development rather than democratizing it across the organizational hierarchy. Cultural relevance is a big critique. Is this too rooted in Western ideas of personal growth? Nora Bateson calls it a violent call to change mindsets. Laurie Anderson, we're trying to cram people into predefined molds. And Dave Snowden saying that this is enlightenment by command. And there's some real value in taking this cultural relevance seriously. Some of the concerns as well is, if we look at those areas of the IDGs, does it speak to all contexts? One of the critiques that I can mention that's very specific, can we talk about inner development in a place like Rwanda that had a genocide very recently without talking about forgiveness? And so how do we bring local context into conversation with the IDGs? And then lastly, the focus on inner transformation without adequate action. Inner development, great, but if we aren't remembering the Sustainable Development Goals and taking time to act into the world, we can turn leaders into overly introspective individuals that are not driving external change, and external change is needed at multiple layers of the system at this point in time. And then some people are saying, wow, this is just slick Scandinavian marketing campaigns. Is there real substance behind it? So whatever you believe about the IDGs, they're in our field. They're an interesting part of what can help us motivate our work, that can help us design transformational coaching and leadership development programs. And we should take it with a pinch of salt, because we may be falling into traps of elitism and acontextual development. Thank you so much. Have a great conversation further.
Thank you, Lucille. Good. So I'm thinking it's time to go off and chat to people. So let us try and have, we've got 20 minutes. So if we can have a 10-minute conversation, really a kind of a integration session, just really talking about what you've learned, what you make of it, what you're going to do with it, those sorts of things. So if we, I'm just checking the number of people. Okay, let's see if this works. Right, so what are you going to make of this? What are you going to do with this? What's been interesting? What hasn't been interesting? I'm just going to move some people around because I want you to try and have a bit of a global experience. 2, 1, 3. Forgive me for fooling around here. Good. Okay, and so it's, are you wanting groups of 2 or 4? Should I put you in 4? I quite like 4.
4's good, Julia.
Yeah. That's fine. And I'm trying, it's what is pretty amazing about today is the prevalence of, I know I shouldn't be objectifying you and saying the prevalence of 5s, but very, very, very interesting. So lovely. I think it was the, yeah, no, I mustn't play with stereotypes. Okay, so I've moved some people around. And hopefully you'll get a bit of a spread. Move you to room 8. Lovely. Thank you for your patience. What made sense? What are you going to do with it? What was interesting or not? See you later. 10 minutes, and it's now 40 minutes past the hour. Thank you. See you in a moment. Hello.
Welcome
Hello.
back, everybody.
How was it? What happened? Anybody want to comment?
Where am I? There.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you, Penny. Yeah, Miriam?
As helpful as AI seems, and it is helpful, I utilize it. If we look at that, the duality of it, of working with a bot and working with a human, there is some polarity in here, right? So in the US, I know of a CEO that wants to fire people because he thinks that he's going to have all the AI do all the work for him. And that's short term. But we're not looking at the long term. We're just looking at how can I make more money today, reducing my work staff. But over time, we need human beings. So it's how do we balance? How do we, as my word for this year, braid it together, AI and humans, and how can we utilize that together?
Nice. Thank you. And Penny, thank you. And thanks, Penny. And thanks for posting that beautiful article. Love that article. Thank you. Let's hear.
Sure. One of the things I work in with international people doing international development in sensitive areas. And I actually offer, would you like this recorded? Would you like an AI summary of the session? Because, you know, they take notes and everything. And thus far, every one of my clients has said no. They don't want our conversation anywhere but in the conversational space, which I find interesting.
Very, very interesting. Yeah.
I even offer them, you know, like if you have a hard time getting out of the office, we can do a walk and talk where you can go outside, take a walk, and I will write any notes and or do a summary. And they want me to write the notes. You know, here, write this down. I want to keep this. And it's just very interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally relate to that. I once was searching for a crime prevention kind of program online using ChatGPT-3. And then I got a lot of answers. And the next meeting I had was with someone that had worked on these so-called confidential programs. And I said, oh, well, you did this, 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 and this. And they said, well, how do you know about that? I said, well, it's on a chat GPT. So I think there is the worry that somehow our conversation might resurface in another format. Thank you for that. Ritu, or as we would call you, Ritu.
We had a very rich conversation, Kathy, Fran, Karen, and I think what they brought in, both Kathy and Fran, and Karen too, was around how do we really tap into that wisdom, and about being in the Western culture where we don't really tap into that. Now, I straddle both spheres. I'm originally from India, and now I live in Toronto and have been living in the US. So that duality is so powerful, I find. So I think bringing, that it's about you yourself leaning into the wisdom and trusting that. And how do you access that in your own self? I think that is so key. Unlike them, I've been in the corporate world. I still straddle that world as a coach, and I find that that's where the work is. In terms of, so I liked what you said around integration rather than socialization. I do believe the two words that really drive me are harmony and integration. Whether it be work and life, whether it be the divide between the different Gen Zs, etc., the ages. So I think it's about, I go back to what I said in the beginning, it's about being inwardly sound and trusting yourself. And trusting that you have, and that, so if we look at the imposter syndrome, which was one of the themes, that comes from the place that we don't trust ourselves enough. We are still hearing voices that probably dogged us from our childhood. I don't know.
Yes.
This has churned up a lot of thought for me. So I don't think I'm very articulate about where I am. But these are some of the thoughts and themes that are holding me captive right now.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you. And a last one from Jochen before we close.
Gosh, that's not the best position to have. I came because I hoped I would get some ideas. I have a little project which has to do somehow with corruption in South African national institutions. And one of the things that we thought about was, can coaching possibly help? And one of the themes that is always coming up is, if people have a better connectivity amongst themselves at the workplace, coaching is, then corruption has a lesser chance. So we were thinking about, can we do this? Can we not do that? And how far? And our diagnostics was by a qualitative tool, not through ChatGPT, because we knew of confidentiality and that this would spread around. So we did the word by hand. And what we found is it is much more the structures than the relationships that enable this. All what happens is in the secret world. It's in the electronics world. And to get into there, yeah. So I'm a little bit, I was very interested, but I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't see right now how could we use coaching as a means to improve the situation. And it is a dire situation. It's rather that the environment, the context impacts so hard on the people that the question is, who am I, is not really a question anymore. It is, how can I sort of survive in this adversarial world if I'm one of the good ones, yeah? Or how can I more make for myself if I'm on the other side? And that is something which bothers me quite a lot, because it's in the center of humanity and being human at the workplace and being able to deliver, as well as staying oneself in a good sense, integrated. So I feel, I got a lot of different hints and points, but I can't really put them together in such a context yet.
I love that. Thank you. because just as we're closing the session, you opened our minds up. And I love that, as you know, I'm very interested in that thinking and how can we use it for social change or changing behavior in organizations. And Penny, before she had to go, put what about the IDGs? We haven't actually spoken about the IDGs. And I know that I'm doing some work in coaching sustainability, and I think we should start looking at these things a little bit more fully. Sustainability, fraud, IDG. This is a new place for us to go and explore. And I like to end on time. So it's been such a fantastic situation. Oh, sorry, my mouth ran ahead of my head. It's been a fantastic supervision session. Thank you so much for your beautiful ideas and thoughts, and I look forward to chatting more. That was such fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next month on the 18th of March for our next supervision session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.